the University of Nebraska at Omaha. And thank you very much to Dr. Ryan and Dr. Williams for being here with us today. And even more so to acknowledge, just as a starting place, that we spent a little more than a year living as a staff in the Barbara White's Community Engagement Center. And certainly that example of collaboration that happens on the UNO campus is a national model. And I personally want to celebrate and acknowledge the White's family in their contribution to our community to create a space for that kind of collaboration. And our presence there, even though it was short in tenure, deeply and profoundly, I believe, changed our access to the thought leaders that exist in Omaha on the university campus. And so many of the things that we'll talk about today didn't necessarily start because we were officing in the Community Engagement Center, but absolutely deepened because we did. And we're excited to know that those relationships, while are beautiful, are still in their infancy. And as we think about what the new chapter of the Tri-Faith Initiative post-location looks like, the opportunity for us to have the kind of partnerships we've already established with the different departments at UNO is such a great opportunity for us. And I think, interestingly, one of the things that's that I've learned the most about this year is the kind of the difference between when we talk to the clergy in particular who have been trained at seminary. What does religious studies through the lens of seminary look like versus what does the Department of Religious Studies through university look like? And the healthy tension that exists between those lenses and what we have to learn for our publics related to both of those. So again, the opportunities are endless, and we'll just dig right in to inviting our guests today to tell a bit about themselves. We'll start with you, Paul, and I'll say I honor your titles. I also honor that we're friends at this point, and I'm going to call you by your first names. I hope that's okay. So Paul first, if you could tell us a bit about how you first heard about the Tri-Faith Initiative.
Sure. Thank you, Wendy. I appreciate the opportunity to share some of my experiences with Tri-Faith. I recall in the older Temple Israel building, sitting in Rabbi Azrael's office, probably in about 2006, it might have been 7. And he started telling me about an idea that he and some others were developing that would bring Christians, Jews, and Muslims together in some kind of intentional community. And so I believe I first heard about it from Rabbi Azrael's mouth in his office about 14 years ago, but then subsequently invited the leadership of Tri-Faith to campus, and we had, I think it was Nancy Kirk, Bob Freeman, Rabbi Azrael, Dr. Moeddin, and Bishop Barker to all speak about the emerging Tri-Faith Initiative, which of course has taken on new partners and new dimensions. But so my memory of Tri-Faith goes back almost to when you guys were first dreaming of it.
Great. And because of that relationship and through that relationship, I want you all to know that Paul has joined our board, representing UNO and the greater community, and is a huge asset. So thank you for your service in that part as well. Carey, can you tell us how you first heard about the Tri-Faith Initiative?
Sure. I make it a point to stay up to date on what's going on in the community. I study intergroup relations, and there's always lots of things happening. So I remember, actually, I read about it in the newspaper, and I've always followed it, every article about Tri-Faith, because I thought it was fascinating and exciting and ambitious, and just the sort of thing that we need more of. So anyway, I just had followed it through the newspaper until we met through our other, intergroup relations work, diversity and inclusion work. So
can you tell us a little bit more about what calls you, or why you're attracted to this cause, personally or through the lens of your work?
Sure. I'll be straightforward. I'm not a religious person, but I value differences. I think intergroup relations are so incredibly important, and those intergroup relations can be based on many, many things, and religion is one of them. And religion often divides people, and my thinking is it ought to bring people together, and that's why I was so excited about the Tri-Faith initiative. So I look at it through an intergroup relations kind of lens, and how people can get along, and respect each other and value even different points of view, even if you don't agree. And then of course there are also many similarities that sometimes we lose sight of when we look at intergroup relations issues. So I'm very interested in the cultural practices of different religions and how those are facilitated or impeded by the way our systems are structured, and what that means for individuals.
So for those who don't know, if you could tell us a little bit about what life experiences have prepared you to look through that lens and to do this work.
I'm a social psychologist, I should say, trained, and I'm in the industrial organizational psychology program. I credit my parents a great deal for preparing me and teaching me the importance of difference and similarity. I remember I grew up in Omaha, and when I was growing up, the civil rights movement was pretty prominent, and there were a lot of, there were riots in Omaha. I was a young girl. And even then, I remember going to Elmwood Park and meeting, we were just little kids playing on the playground, and there were two other little girls who were Black, and they didn't seem to like us very much. And I thought to myself, wow, we've really got some I don't know why I thought of this, but I looked at it that way, is we've really got problems when you encounter people and they're angry with you. And so to me, it was a reflection of the larger problem in society. And I also remember as a little girl pledging allegiance to the flag in school, and one student was not allowed to do so. I never knew exactly the reason, but it was striking to me that this, one kid had to be sort of excluded in a way. And so those kinds of things. And then, as I said, my parents were very involved and cared a lot about social issues and justice issues. So then, let's see, I went to UNO and got a degree in social work. I worked with people who had mental disabilities, which was incredibly educational. And I learned a lot about a different perspective from social work. But then my really true love was psychology. And so I got a PhD in psychology at Boulder, and I was able to combine my interest in social justice issues and intergroup relations and research and teaching and math, and it all kind of came together. A lot of it was serendipitous. I had a lucky, fortunate to work with some really good people So it's funny to reflect on these things because a lot of it feels like it was kind of good luck. Good encounters with interesting people who were very helpful, and also I learned a lot from.
Thank you. Paul, we'll come to you next with the similar questions of kind of the intersection even between what attracted you to it and prepared you for this work.
Well, I think the attraction, interreligious encounters and interfaith conversations have kind of been a part of my life since I was a child. I remember coming to the realization early on that ignorance and false information combined can be used to create division and conflict. I grew up in the civil rights era as well, and have memories of the politicization of those issues in the kind of negative, disruptive, divisional ways. But any effort to resist conflict and violence with knowledge and compassion is attractive to me. And the Tri-Faith Initiative seems to embody that fundamental drive. And in particular, I believe that religious and cultural literacy combined with positive encounters with people of different religious traditions or non-religious traditions can be one way and maybe a critical component of resisting division indexed on religious lines. The same applies to division indexed on ethnic and racial lines as well. Like Carey, I kind of recall the influence of my parents, particularly my mother, who was a pastor, an activist. She was an ordained minister for over 60 years, a woman of faith, a believing woman, but also believed in putting her faith into practice. And so she was very active in the desegregation suit, trying to get the integration of the public schools in Corpus Christi, Texas. When I was there in public school, she was involved in working closely with LULAC and NAACP and Urban League and Raza Unida. In fact, the first Black Panther that I met when I was in high school was a friend of my mother's. So she kind of opened up a world of seeking justice and peace, and motivated out of faith, not because, not as opposed to, well, there were plenty of people out there, people of faith, who embraced racism and still do, who embraced injustice, who embraced other social ills and still do. But my mother said she was on the cutting edge of these movements: civil rights, anti-war, gender equity, et cetera, right down to gay and lesbian issues. She was on the cutting edge of all of that from my childhood. So I remember asking her one time, "Mother, how can a woman, a girl coming out of conservative East Texas hold these views? How can you be a liberal?" And she said, "Paul, I am not a liberal. I've never been a liberal. I am a New Testament Christian, and everything I believe comes out of the teachings of Jesus himself." And I said, "Thank you. Yes, ma'am. I appreciate the answer." So with the Reverend Dr. Catherine Williams in the back of my brain 24/7, it's just natural to me to do interfaith work and peace and justice work.
I think we'll jump right into talking about our partnerships. Paul, if we could start with you, could you share a bit about the Religious Studies Department and Tri-Faith's current collaboration and your role in it?
Sure. I think the collaboration has kind of three components. Some years ago, before we had a full-time executive director in Tri-Faith, we established an internship for a religious studies major or minor to work with the Tri-Faith VGA organization. And that was sufficiently successful. It keeps going. In fact, one of our early interns was employed by VGA full-time after that experience. The second area is we've done a lot of advertising each other's events and a little bit of co-sponsorship of events between religious studies and the Tri-Faith Initiative. But the one that I'm most excited about right now is working with Jeremy Fricke, the education director, and Amanda Ryan, the program director, on a community engaged curriculum project. As I mentioned earlier, one of the most serious concerns that I have is the woeful lack of understanding. Carey mentioned cultural literacy, but there's also religious literacy. And so we're developing a 1-hour credit course on Jews, Christians, and Muslims with an interfaith orientation or discussion component. And we're looking at other topics so that we can have basically short courses, the equivalent of 1 credit hour, or about 5 class sessions, if you think of it in terms of a series in the community, where we can bring together UNO students, members of the Tri-Faith communities, but also other members of the community to try to begin to address the problems of cultural and religious illiteracy, but also to, frankly, from the perspective of religious studies, to help more people understand what religious studies can bring to the table when it comes to some of the major contemporary social issues. So it's this curricular piece that I'm particularly excited about with Jeremy and Amanda. And it's still a work in progress, but we hope to roll it out in somewhere in the next 6 to 8 months, if possible.
Thank you. We'll go a little deeper in that, but Carey, if you could tell us the same, if you could give us an overview of the collaborative projects that Tri-Faith and your department are working on.
Sure. So as I said, I do research on intergroup relations. I teach a course on diversity in organizations and working with the Omaha Chamber on their code project, commitment to opportunity, diversity, and equity. Thank you. I did it. Anyway, and that's how I met Wendy, through that project, and also the Circle, which is a group of diversity and inclusion practitioners that meet monthly. Anyway, so Wendy said that they were interested in us doing some research with respect to religion and in the workplace primarily. And so I hadn't really, to be honest, I hadn't thought about it. And we went to the literature, and Jeremy sent us some things. And so we were looking through, and we were actually shocked that there really is nothing about religion as a dimension of diversity in the workplace. There's some studies, but they tend to average across religions and assume that whatever they find is true for all of the religions. And I'm thinking, no, I don't think it is the same for everybody in the workplace. And so we started thinking about that, and what does that mean for people who, something as basic as religious holidays, but other kinds of beliefs and sometimes religious symbols and that you might have in the workplace, and how people perceive you, and all of those sorts of things. And so I got kind of excited about this, because I thought, wow, we're really missing the boat on this whole topic. And so I have a graduate, again, luck would have it, I had a graduate student who's interested in religion in the workplace. She may be the first student I've had who was interested in this topic, which is pretty amazing, at the same time. And so she developed her thesis, which she's in the process of collecting data now, and she's looking at Jews, Christians and Muslims, and how accommodations, religious accommodations, are perceived by where our participants are people who have identified as Christian only, and that's partly to keep the research design manageable. But we're looking at how they perceive accommodations, and the accommodations are ones that have been they've gone through the court and were approved. I mean, the court sided with the people who requested the accommodations, all of them. So they're based on actual complaints that have been filed that were found in favor of the person, the employee. And there's of similar magnitude, we think. And so we're going to look at how people perceive those accommodations. And we obviously have some expectations. We also have another study that we're doing, and it's sort of a more general one where we gather data from Christians, Muslims, and Jews. And we are just asking them, or we did ask them about their experiences with religion in the workplace, just an open-ended question that we've pretty much finished coding. And there's some, well, first of all, people have had some interesting experiences. And some of them are, I mean, somebody thought that, this one surprised me, that's why it stands out in my head, but was dealing with something difficult. And she talked to a coworker, and it turned out they were, of similar religious, and they talked about it from a religious standpoint. And she was afraid that it would be found out and she'd get fired. And I thought, whoa, that's pretty strong. And so there's a lot of like, how does it fit into the workplace? And, but there is that perception that it has no place at all. And yet people do talk about it and things like that. So we're looking at whether those experiences are different, and whether some people see it as more appropriate or acceptable to incorporate into the workplace, and how. And one of the things we expect, of course, is that if Christians may be less likely to think it's relevant to the workplace. And the reason being, our system is really designed around Christian holidays and activities. So, so that they don't have to really address the issue. So anyway, that's what we're sort of thinking, but who knows? We haven't finished analyzing the data, so I've been wrong before, and we'll see what the data have to say. But I think the primary thing we'll learn from this research is something about how people view the acceptability of religion and what religious practices and accommodations in the workplace. And then it'll probably identify many more questions for us to address in additional studies. So, but it's really fascinating, and people wrote a lot, and they don't always do that in studies, write a lot. So, so it's certainly interesting, and they are highly variable.
Carey, there's a question from Lila in the chat about what denominations of Christianity are included in the study. Could you speak about all the work that went into the decisions about how that was?
Well, yeah, that was a tough one. And I don't know that we've satisfactorily resolved it. The way we gathered the data, it's from a crowdsourcing website, and they ask people to complete lots of measures so that you can actually select people who say they're a Christian. But it doesn't go in much depth. So what we've done is ask them, well, we've done one thing is how strongly they identify with their religion. We've measured that. And then we also asked them to indicate what their religion is. So we're going to have to look at that, and it's going to be complicated because it's a huge, well, obviously it's a huge deal. It covers a lot of territory. And so we're going to have to, so we ended up assessing it, and we're going to be analyzing for differences as a function of what they say their religious affiliation is.
In terms of denomination. So there was an opportunity for them to further specify the lens through which they understand Christianity.
Exactly. Yeah. So we have some things in there. We got a lot of work to do.
So I'll just pause here to note that for those of you who are thinking, wait a minute, the Tri-Faith Initiative mission is to co-locate 3 religious institutions and uplift the relationships between those. What I think we've learned in our growing presence together at the Tri-Faith Commons is that number one, you don't only experience the religious other in your place of worship. As a matter of fact, your place of worship is often one of the most siloed things. And so having the opportunity to acknowledge that people experience the religious other in the workplace or in higher education, as 2 examples, means that what we could learn from the co-location and the model of creating a peaceful neighborhood might also influence other places where people experience the religious other. And so the workplace in particular, I came to realize that it's not necessarily a safe space to bring your authentic religious self for many people, particularly people of minority religions. And so as we started to go to, I started to go to chamber meetings or things like that, people were like, well, you know, you're not allowed to talk about religion or politics at work. And so then how do we use these opportunities to partner with leaders in Omaha to say, wait a minute, the Tri-Faith Initiative intends to honor that people have safe space to bring their religious selves. So how do we start that dialogue? How do we increase religious literacy in collaboration with projects like we're doing with Paul? And how do we understand and start getting a baseline measure for what's happening so that over the course of time, we can say that this model that we have at 132nd Street has an impact beyond 132nd Street. So that's how we came to, in addition to the proximity of being at the Community Engagement Center and rubbing shoulders with people who were asking questions about our work. And so the opportunities, of where we could go next. I'm curious to know what questions this raises for any of you who are community members, who are living the experiences on the Tri-Faith Commons. Jeremy and Amanda, questions that you may have, feel free to unmute yourself and add in. So anyone? Or I'll keep going. So as we kind of unpack that, Paul, why is this helpful for the religious study? You know, I'm saying some of the reasons why I think that it's important for Tri-Faith, but why is it important for the religious studies department and for you professionally, or your perceptions of why else it would be important for Tri-Faith?
Well, I think one of the reasons it's important for religious studies is this is our field of study. I mean, and while not all faculty are necessarily engaged as practitioners or adherents to a religious community, we understand the importance of religion both in the best of human experiences and in the worst of human experiences. And so in a way, it's us trying to find a way to bring our knowledge, our expertise into the world of what they call real world human problems. So that by itself is a good thing. And community engagement is important for the university as a whole, as you mentioned with the CEC, but it's also important for all departments to help the larger community that supports our work through their tax dollars to see the relevance of the kinds of projects, whether it's research or curricular, that is going on campus. Now, of course, as the chair of religious studies at UNO, I would be delighted to see more students register for our classes, to recognize that what we do in religious studies is the academic study of religion and not advanced Sunday school or advanced CCD or Hebrew school, right? We don't replicate someone's experience within a religious community. As the Supreme Court has suggested, we are here to teach about religion, not to teach religion in the sense of inculcating or propagandizing or proselytizing. So it's a way of bringing our department into engagement with the community and hopefully get what we have to offer out there, because I think there's a lot of misunderstandings of the purpose of a religious studies department in a state university. What Carey is doing is a beautiful example of a social psychological approach to the study of religion. So to me, it's an extension of religious studies in much the same way that Ramazan Kilinch in political science, he publishes on religious minorities in the Middle East. That's religious studies, but he's coming at it as a political scientist. There are art historians on campus. There have been sociologists. There are quite a number of historians in the history department, all of whom engage in some form of religious studies. And so I see that as a value, not only within the university, but in the community. And the fact that religious studies has the name religion in it just means that I feel a responsibility to promote the study of religion and to see the study of religion as one way to address some of the idiocy and ignorance that we hear across the landscape, and not just in today's political climate, but I remember back to the 60s when there was a lot of idiocy and ignorance being pronounced, often in the name of religion, and there was resistance to that, often in the name of religion. So I don't think the university has done a good job of communicating well the value of the study of religion. And I'm delighted that Carey is discovering that from a social psychological perspective, as I have for many years from a historical anthropological perspective. I don't know if that quite answers, but of course we'd love to have a lot of majors in our program. That would be delightful if that was a side benefit of this.
Amanda, are you raising your hand?
Yeah, because I just want to add to that, because I am a graduate of the religious studies department, and I kind of wish that Sasha was still here. But I just think it's that this partnership is really important because, you know, when I got my religious studies degree, my parents and family and friends were like, what are you going to do with that? And like, are you going to be a preacher, a rabbi, or whatever, right? And I was like, no, I want to do community work across religious differences to bring people together, right? And so that is what I was able to focus on in the department and then continue within my graduate studies, you know. So I think it's a added bonus for both the department and Tri-Faith that we have a religious studies department in Omaha so that you can have qualified people to work within this field, but then also with having the initiative here to get people, and hopefully some younger people as well, interested in this conversation so they can then go to UNO and study in religious studies. So I'm very passionate about that. If you want to talk about the department, just let me know and I can help recruit.
Nice. We'll come to you in a minute, Carey, but
Right.
Jeannette is on the call also. And I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself so that you can prepare for my big question. I'm coming here, but we have these formal partnerships that we're working on with the Religious Studies Department and on research with Carey, but there are a host of less formal partnerships. One of which I would say is Jeannette being a mentor to Amanda as an incredible example, and certainly your work in human rights. And I wondered if I just don't want to leave you out of this conversation. I'm so honored that you are able to join us today. Can you tell a little bit about your role at UNO and how that intersects with our work as well? Maybe introduce just your work.
Sure. I'm Jeannette Gabriel. I'm the director of the Schwab Center for Israel and Jewish Studies, and I'm pleased to be part of the Religious Studies Department. I don't know that I have a lot more to add after Dr. Williams' words of wisdom about the importance of religious studies. He's such a wonderful advocate for us. But I will mention that there are a lot of opportunities for students to really get deeply engaged in the community. And in my short tenure so far at the Schwab Center, I've been very involved in trying to deepen those opportunities. So I work with various students in a mentorship role on undergraduate research grants that are available at UNO to do research projects in the community. And we have two very wonderful research projects going on right now. One is doing oral histories with people in the community who are Jews by choice. And the other is an examination of child behavior, both in the Minneapolis Jewish Federation and also here at in Omaha, to examine how Jewish organizations are dealing with issues of childhood trauma. So there's that kind of opportunity that's available. There's also research grants for faculty that we provide to become more engaged in research around topics that the center addresses. But I think there's so many different opportunities for students to really step into the community and have experiences. Myself and other faculty in religious studies are doing service learning projects. I'm working on a service learning project this semester with Lacey Studnicka at Habitat for Humanity, where we're documenting stories of refugees, of how their life experiences have been impacted by tensions surrounding issues connected to women and religion. So we really work to bring the university into the community in ways that are meaningful for community organizations and build those collaborations while still creating opportunities for students to develop scholarship that will take them to the next level of their careers.
Thank you. Reminded me also that Laura Alexander is doing a service learning class, and her group will be volunteering at the community garden and orchard. And so I just want you to start to see the number of pieces that are connecting Tri-Faith and our work to UNO, and then connecting back into the community. It's thrilling, actually. Kind of fun to see the umbrella of all of it here. So Carey, let's come back to you, and in particular, what benefit, even hearing this piece too, are you feeling that this knowledge or this research initiative has for your department?
Well, I have to tell you, for me personally, this is the most exciting time in my career. It is so, the reasons are maybe not good, but it is so great to see Omaha and the community really seem to begin to invest in diversity and inclusion efforts. And to have people care about the work I do is amazing. It's not just in a journal somewhere. So it's really very exciting in that way. Now, in terms of, I have lots of students, undergraduates and graduates, and it brings a whole new dimension to the program. I would say our program, and for sure, is being more effortful in incorporating issues of diversity and inclusion into the curriculum, and that includes religion. And so I think it's going to, we have a lot of students, a lot of people who will be leaders in the community. And I feel like that's just a huge, huge opportunity to educate and get some experiences and understanding that they wouldn't have otherwise. And so it's a major educational opportunity for our students.
Could you speak a little bit to whether the research is more qualitative or quantitative in nature, and kind of where you see that going next?
I tend to be quantitative. However, I'm also a huge believer in asking people what they think first, especially when it's a new area. But and so that qualitative piece, that is qualitative, and we have to identify common themes and that sort of thing. But I'm a big believer in that if we select the questions to ask, right, we might be missing the boat. We might be missing the issues that are most important to people in the community. And so, or we might think we understand what people are telling us in the numbered, the quantitative responses, but find a different way of thinking about those quantitative responses by reading what they say. So also in coming to, like, working with Wendy and Jeremy and Amanda and talking about some of these issues, and we might think about the same responses. We might interpret somewhat differently depending on, context matters. I'm a social psychologist. Context matters. And there's more than one way to think about things. So to think about what's possibility here, what are the possibilities about what this means, and that's how we end up identifying more research questions as well. Like we didn't even anticipate. It might seem striking, but we didn't anticipate that a lot of our participants work for organizations where religion is a part. It's a religiously affiliated organization that they work for. Well, that's quite a different kind of thing potentially. So anyway, I kind of lost my train of thought here. Oh, qualitative or quantitative, yes. So although I was trained quantitative, I have definitely embraced qualitative over the years, and because a lot of the stuff we have from mainstream psychology is very, well, it's said to be based on weird people, and that means white or Western, educated, WEI, I forget what it stands for, rich, democratic, what did I miss, the I, well, whatever. Anyway, which is actually a very small proportion of the global population. So it's very westernized, and when you ask people things, or you look at it from their point of view, you can see there's a very different thing. So a lot of the processes that we thought were sort of basic processes, like perceptual, I don't know if you're familiar with that illusion, where depending on which way the arrow is pointing, the two lines could be the same, but they look longer in one case than in another. And that was considered a basic perception. Well, it turns out that's culturally bound. And it comes from people like us being in rooms all the time that have those kinds of lines, right? The walls line up. Whereas in other cultures, they're less dominant cultures, that illusion doesn't exist for them. So something as basic as that turns out to be culturally bound. And those kind of findings really make me think, wow, we really have to be careful about the assumptions that we make. It's also much more interesting. So the same thing can mean something very different for, different cultural groups.
Interesting, thank you. Paul, if we could turn to at least acknowledge what Jeff's question related to the passport is. If you could, I'm not sure everyone knows what the passport is, so if you could speak to that a little bit, and then about what you think this process of making some courses available online in light of COVID might look like.
Okay, the Senior Passport program is an opportunity for people at UNO, is an opportunity for people who are 65 or older to sign up essentially to audit classes up to, I believe it's 2 a semester at a very low fee. And I have found that when Senior Passport students take our classes, they bring enrichment to the classes. When I asked Rabbi Azrael to teach Hebrew scriptures, and we had 10 4-credit undergraduate students and 10 Senior Passport students, it was an amazing pedagogical experience for the undergraduate students to see a rabbi engaged with, in some cases, members of his congregation on issues of Torah. And it was fascinating. So I have seen Senior Passport students as really important to improve the pedagogical value of our classes, because they bring life experiences and a seriousness, but also they know why they're there, which is always fun. Now, we unfortunately, in the online pivot that took place at the university this past spring, we discovered that Senior Passport classes are not available. Senior Passport students cannot register for online classes. I have taken that up with administrators who are above me and lower than Sasha, and I'm still not sure I understand the logic behind that policy. I am trying to work with the administration at least to make a temporary exception to that policy. But so far, that is an unfortunate block to having community members with a lifetime of experience contributing to our UNO classes. And that also is a bit of an impediment to the pedagogical model we had for the work that Amanda and Jeremy and I are doing. We will see how that develops, but it's just a matter of getting into the nitty-gritty with the administrators about, are there privacy issues, are there financial issues, what are the issues? And I'm determined, hopefully with Wendy's help, to overcome those issues. There is something else I'd like to toss in here that's not immediately relevant to that question, but I see that Dr. John Lyden is on this call. He is the newest member of our faculty, although not the youngest member of our faculty. And okay, he's waving there. Is that the Hagia Sophia behind you? You're muted, John.
It's actually the Blue Mosque from the inside.
The Blue Mosque, okay, in Istanbul. John and I had the privilege to go to a religion and film conference that the Journal of Religion and Film co-sponsored and Religious Studies helped support in Istanbul a few years ago. And the reason I'm calling John out is because he's the longtime editor of the Journal of Religion and Film, which is an online peer-reviewed journal that gets over 100,000 downloads per year. This is a journal that was established by Dr. Bill Blezek, one of our colleagues who just retired, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with Bill. And so John is stepping into our program, not just as the editor of the journal, but to enhance religion and film programming. And if you want to get at fundamental issues of diversity and inclusion, of stereotyping and othering, taking a close look at how cinema portrays different societies is a beautiful way to do that. And John is the man to go to because he's the guy that approves which articles get into this journal, but he's also going to be developing curriculum to help people understand the relationships between religion or religious values and popular culture of different sorts, but particularly cinema. So I just wanted to give a shout out to John, and be sure that those of you who are kind of stalwarts of the TFI organization or community are familiar with him and reach out to him for his expertise, because John has a lot to offer, and we are delighted that he's part of our program this year, and hopefully as long as I'm at UNO. But there was a final piece to your question, Wendy, that I disrupted in introducing John.
You're good. I welcome John.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to say, yeah, that's one reason I wanted to join this today. I've been interested in the Tri-Faith Initiative for some time. I used to live in Omaha and I moved away and I've just come back. And so a lot of this work has been developing in the years I was not in Omaha, but I'm very interested in interfaith dialogue. I appreciate the shout out from Paul, and it does relate to this work in popular culture, as the scene behind me shows, as he pointed out. You know, and the journal has this international audience and participation and multi-religious contributions to it. So yeah, I'm very interested in this work. Thank you.
We'll be in touch. Paul, let's come back to the lens, curricular lens of the Jewish, Christian, Islam course that you are working on with Jeremy and Amanda. Can you tell us the next layer of depth in terms of the curriculum for this particular course and some of your decisions about belief, behavior, and belonging in particular related to that course?
Okay, the particular course, we see it as we do offer a course at UNO called Introduction to World Religions. And we offer a course called Religions of the West, which includes Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. But we realize that 3 credit-hour courses and enrollment in the university is not everybody's objective. On the other hand, if there can be a university community collaboration in curricular development, what we would like to do is bring the conversation back to, first of all, the basics. So the course is intended to be a very basic introduction to the similarities and differences between Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, but with a very particular focus on how historically Jews, Christians, and Muslims have both viewed and treated each other, so that we can bring the conversation of the class ultimately to the question of how can a better understanding of each other's religious traditions, or if we come from outside of all of them, that's fair, but how can understanding these religious traditions help minimize the problems of not just ignorance, but of stereotyping, othering, basically religious bigotry. So we see this as kind of a one step in the direction of trying to address that problem of religious illiteracy in the community and beyond. So that, I think, Wendy, are there other dimensions to this that you were thinking of? But that's really the intent of the course. And the idea is that it would be about 5 class sessions, and each person who signs up for it would study ahead of time. And if we can work out the administrative convolutions, we will be able to bring together both UNO students, members of the Tri-Faith communities, but also other community members. So when you said, what does success look like? To me, success looks like gatherings of UNO students, Tri-Faith community members, other members of the community to get together to learn and to talk in a safe and mutually respectful context about matters of religious diversity, indeed matters of religious difference, and sometimes conflict. So that's kind of the trajectory we're on, but we intend to have more than one class. The JCI, or Jews, Christians, and Muslims, is only one, but there are other classes that we're discussing, developing, that we will develop in response to the interest of members of the community and of UNO students. So I'm trying to kind of bring community engagement and curricular development into the same project with this.
Thank you. So Carey, final question. What does success look like for you in this partnership?
That's great, great question. And I was just messaging with Richard there. And you know, religion is a no-no in the workplace, basically. And yet people, I mean, I was thinking about this when we first talked about doing research, and I thought, yeah, we don't talk about religion, and I think, and yet I know the religious, every person's religion in our department. So obviously we do talk about it somehow, right? And so I thought, you know, it is relevant. People need to be able to be their authentic selves. It's an important part of people's identity. Now, how that should, you know, work as a complex problem, of course. But it's certainly an important part of people's identity, and one that needs to be respected in the workplace. And so hopefully, I would say educating employees and employers, first of all, better understanding the issues, but also then educating employees and employers about religious diversity in the workplace, as well as the various other kinds of diversity that people focus on.
Thank you. Well, this was, as expected, a lovely conversation, and really the beginning of this next chapter for us. I'm going to grab, I'm multitasking here, grab this survey link. We would love your feedback and to know how this information landed on you, what additional questions you have for us, and to remind you that this is every other Thursday that we have this noon gathering. And our next conversation is with members of the Episcopal Diocese. So those of you who know, the Episcopal Diocese very generously gave us $500,000 to complete the Tri-Faith Center, and they were the original Christian partner in our initiative, and yet they graciously stepped away when they didn't have the capacity to lead as the Christian partner. And so now, as they re-enter, and we we explore what it might mean for them to re-enter as a partner, not as a move, you know, we're not building another building, but what does it mean to have another Christian partner in terms of affiliate, and what would that mean to the diocese? What would it mean to the parishes? What would it mean to individuals? And so I've invited Bishop Scott Barker to represent the diocese, Reverend Keith Winton to represent All Saints Parish, and Camille Culp, who was volunteer with the utmost commitment and stature for a decade as a contributor and member of the Episcopal Diocese when they were the partner. So we'll have just a very open conversation about what having access to this kind of work as another denomination of Christianity might end up looking like. So I hope you'll consider joining us for that. Next week, Amanda Ryan is teaching a course on Abraham's Whiteboard about sociology and religion. And so I know you all know how to get more information about the work that we're doing. And we really appreciate you showing up here. And thank you, Paul and Carey, for your partnership, your friendship, and the importance of the value that you're bringing to our community through your work. So thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank
Talk to you all soon.